raised in church, born, since I can remember, went to church. Can't remember ever a time not going to church. And it was nice and lovely and all that, but it was a church where you constantly, as I got older and really started to understand the word and realized, what church is all about, I constantly felt like a failure. And I just felt very stressed out all the time. I'm a very analytical person who really tends to overanalyze and take everything to heart, and I'm a worrisome person, and I was as a child, and so these verses that you would read, they are scary, and they're scary especially when you're a little kid, and then if you don't fully understand it. But I remember as a kid being so afraid to go to sleep at night, and I would come into my mom and dad's room, and my mom and dad can attest to this, and I would be worried to fall asleep because I thought that if there was a sin that I hadn't repented for, and I somehow died in my sleep, or a tornado came or a disaster happened, I was going to go to hell. And I remember even asking my mom, I don't know, I was about 8 or 9, when I started to really have questions about gosh, this is really hard, and I asked her one time, I said, Mom, what do you do if there's a sin that you forgot?
Right.
And her, bless her heart, she didn't know any better.
No, I didn't.
Her answer to me was, well, call me Shell, just pray to the Lord that He'll bring it to your remembrance, okay? And then just ask Him to forgive you for anything that you may have done that you can't remember to confess. And that was her answer to me. And so I grew up doing that. I would lay in bed for 35 minutes every night, going down the list, and then at the very end, I'd make sure to slip in there. And if there's anything I forgot, or I don't remember, please forgive me for that too. And so this went on into my teenage years, and when I was a young teenager, we stopped going to this church, and I don't even know why we did it, but we just did, and my mom, dad did, and I did. And we kind of did, as a family, fall out of church there for a little while. We bounced around from church to church, and I just kind of got to a place, like Jed said, where I was just like, this is hopeless.
Right.
I am never going to be perfect, being raised in church, and I just constantly felt like I was having to do a do-over, starting like Monopoly, go back to start, And when you are constantly feeling like that, it's so hard to stick with something. It's almost impossible. It's human nature to know that if you're not going to succeed at something, don't even try. You don't want to fail. That's the society we live in. We live in a very success-driven society, right? So I gave up for a lot of years. No, don't get me wrong. I still love the Lord, and I still prayed here and there, and I always knew the Lord and, professed Him. But I did get to a point where I just kind of stopped walking the walk because I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And then my adult life went on, and I went to be married and have children. And about a year ago, Mom and Dad, once again, like I said, we bounced here. I go to church here and there, but never really found a home-based church. Another one since then. I had been hearing about this awesome church that my parents were going to in Pineville, and they're like, you gotta try it, which of course your parents want you in church. So just being honest, I'm like, okay, yeah, they want me to try it, they want me in church, But I slowly but surely, and really not even that slow, pretty fast, started to see a huge change in my parents. Not that they were bad people before, they've always been so wonderful, such wonderful people, but just their level of joy and happiness, and just no more stress. I remember going back to the young church days. I remember, because I was a very intuitive child, I remember hearing my parents talk about tithing and being stressed out about if finances were tight and they didn't get to tithe that week, bad things were going to happen. And I even remember, I've heard my dad say out of his mouth before, when we were young children, if something bad happened to him, it was because of something he did or forgot to do or didn't do right.
Yeah.
And he was being punished for that. But I saw that go away. And I saw in their freedom of just rejoicing in life and loving life. And so I'm like, all right, I'll check this out. So I go to church with them, and it'll be like a year in March that I started at Bill's Church. And the first few services, And I don't like to say that either. I do because I have no problem with it, but like Jed said, it's just like when you say it, you almost cringe because you feel like you're defending it or like, I don't know. Anyway, but the more I sat under it and really learned, it was just like, oh my gosh, an awakening, just like a renewal of my spirit. And, once I really realized that I was worth it, that there was nothing that I had to do. I had already done it. He loved me. And this whole time, he's probably been sitting up there and his heart has been breaking for me because he's seen me walk through these paths of depression and oppression and anxiety, and he's sitting up there thinking, if she only knew how much I loved her, and all she has to do is come to me, And when I really came to that realization, it changed my life. It changed my life. I no longer live in fear. I no longer live in anxiety and stress because I know that in the end, the result's going to be the same no matter what. You're going to mess up. You're going to do things. It's human nature. But that's done. It's taken care of. And now what I can concentrate on, and I love this, is just my one-on-one relationship with the Lord. And just getting to know Him better and loving Him and building that relationship and being excited, like Jed said, to do your service and dive in and it's just exciting. And, there's been things that's happened in the last few months. I'm, not to get into it, but I'm going through a divorce, and I really feel there was a time where I was just almost, just like, well, why did this happen? Because me and my husband started going to church, and that's supposed to make things better, and it didn't. It just seemed to drive him further away from me. And the more and more I've been praying about it, I know beyond know that the Lord had a plan for me all along. And He got me in just the nick of the time. He knows things we don't know. He knows everything that's going to ever happen to us. And He scooped me up and put His loving arms around me, and He has carried me through this thing like no other. I'm about the happiest divorced person you can get. And not that I can go divorce. I didn't want to get divorced, but it's just, and it's because of Him, because He has protected me and sheltered me and said, come here, I'm going to be your husband. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do, and I just wanted to share that because, I was there. I was that person who thought I wasn't good enough, who thought that I can't do that. I'm going to mess up, so I may as well not even try. And it's just such a wonderful feeling when you finally realize that He loves you so much, as like you love your own children. When your own children mess up, you're gonna, you want them to do right because it's good for them. You don't want them to sin, and Jesus doesn't want us to sin because it hurts our soul. Not that He will hold that against us. It's just He don't want us to be hurt. Like you don't want your own children to be hurt. You want the best for your children. He wants the best for us, and that's just my little testimony.
I want to share her dad. He was telling me once in Bible study that he used to think that his favor was based on being good, and when he was going through a bad time, that's because he was bad. But the problem was he couldn't even enjoy the good times because he knew he was going to screw up and eventually he was going to go back down. And so I remember being like that. And I didn't even realize it until Scott had just mentioned that one day in Bible study. I thought that was me. When things were good, I was just thinking, man, I'm going to screw this deal up.
Something that's funny is I used to do the whole, God, there's something that I forgot to confess and bring it to my attention. And when she said that, Dad said, well, hard, because he already forgot. I was going to remind you.
Well, I guess all things are possible with God.
Hallelujah.
That verse you talked about in Hebrews about impossible to renew them to repentance. I understood grace, I thought, but that verse caused me to live a schizophrenic Christianity. One minute I'm covered in grace and the next minute I'm condemned. And I couldn't figure it out. And then some years ago when that lady you were talking about, a couple years before she came, I went and heard that message. And that's what changed it for me. I understood what it meant. I understood the reality that these people had heard Jesus Christ, believed he was who he said he was, and then turned back to that law. How can you renew somebody to repentance when they had said they've already repented? They already said, this is him. And God pointed out to me, I've never said there was anything with Jesus. I've never gone back to another sacrifice in my life. There's only been Jesus. You know, have I messed up? Yeah, but I've never said, God, here's my offering for sin. My offering has always been Jesus.
Yeah.
So you can't renew me to something that you can't renew something to repentance that they've already repented to. He's not going to be another Savior. He's not going to be another put on the cross again. It's only one. Only one. If there is only one renewal to repentance, it's Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I was listening. What he was sharing was just wonderful. I think mostly because it's just wonderful for me to see young people with this.
Amen.
I was always taught Paul prayed for his knowing sins and his unknowing sins. Because Paul was schizophrenic. One thing, I want to give an example to go along with what our brother was saying tonight, because I think maybe it might give some of us a little bit clearer picture. When you start talking about the forgiveness of sin, first of all, you have to understand that really, in reality, there's only one, and that's denying him.
That's right. That's right.
That's it.
He either covered it or he didn't.
That's right.
But the reality is, when Paul was dealing with the Hebrew people who lived under Hebraic or Levitical law, what they believed was the sacrifice that they made, the animal sacrifice. Our brother was saying that it just covered that, but if you really study that out, what they really believed was every year I go and present a sacrifice. And that sacrifice pushes my sin ahead one more year.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what winds up happening is, as the years go along, you never give up any of those sins. So the sins you started offering sacrifices for at your bar mitzvah when you were 13, when you're 50, you are still offering sacrifice to move all of those years of sins plus this year's, because there was no forgiveness.
Right.
Sin was never done away with until the perfect sacrifice.
That's right.
When that sin, whether it was a day or 1,000 years, when that sin met the perfect sacrifice, it was abolished. Colossians says that we were translated out of the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of his dear Son, the kingdom of light. Now, to me, maybe I'm the only one here that thinks this way, but I think if I'm taken out of dark and put in light, that means I'm not dark anymore.
Right.
That means I can now see.
Right.
That means that what was, old things have passed away, and now all things have become new.
Amen.
I'm walking in heavenly places.
Amen.
I'm on streets of gold, whether I can perceive it or not.
Right.
I'm behind the walls of jasper, that helps you to understand that kind of thing. We need to get a concept to realize that what was before the cross was all about temporarily holding on until next year.
Right.
What was after the cross was realizing that this is the day the Lord has made.
Amen. Amen. Awesome. Hallelujah. You know, like Tara, when she was talking about that she felt, that just reminds me of Paul in Colossians, says we were enemies in our own mind. You know, and so you were never really an enemy with God, you just talked to Him. And so, and the Lord just said, just like she said, just imagine the Lord with a lot of His children saying, I'm not an enemy, I'm not against you, I'm for you. I'm not basing this on your performance. I'm basing you on my son's performance, what he did. And so, this is why I always say my heart's for the church. My heart's for the church, because I want to see the church built. I want to see the church victorious and live a life.
I'm gonna interrupt you again. What you just said about the enemy. I love, there's a minister, I'll be nice and not say names, but there's a minister, I heard him say this one time years ago, and I'm not even sure he really knew what he said, but he did. He said, my enemy is in me.
Right.
I'm the only enemy I have.
Right.
Christ will away with all the rest of my enemies.
All right, amen. Hallelujah.
Amen.
Anybody else got anything, you want a testimony or anything that you want to share before we dismiss? I'm gonna say this real quick, okay? We're gonna be at Saturday Night High tomorrow night, and, we're gonna go there, and I'm gonna, I put myself last, which is probably the smartest thing, there's great speakers ahead of me, and I'm gonna try to do good.
Perform.
Oh, Jack, hey, thank you. Let me announce this real quick.